All right. Welcome on episode 2 of the Chris Schlehlein Experience. I'm your host, Chris Schlehlein. My co-host to the right, Brandon Eckel. And we're welcomed on by Racine, Wisconsin, by a man from Racine, Wisconsin, former D3 standout at the University of Wisconsin-Lacrosse, former MLB player, a possible Father of the Year candidate, and you can watch him live on Bally Sports Wisconsin. This is Vinny Rottino. Vinny, thanks for taking some time with us.
Chris, Brandon, thanks for having me on. I love that introduction. You know what? You can tell my wife that I'm a possible Father of the Year candidate. I think that would go over well. So don't be afraid to let her know.
Absolutely. We'll get that shipped out in the mail to her. But I guess just to get started, can you touch on like what it was like growing up in Racine?
Yeah. Growing up in Racine, Wisconsin, I loved it. Right on the lake between Milwaukee and Chicago, about 80,000 people. Went to Jefferson Lighthouse, McKinley Middle School, and then St. Catherine's High School. So I had a great experience and continue to have a great experience here in this city. It's a diverse community. Love living here. Have, my best friends in life are here. My parents are still here. My wife is from here. So Racine, Wisconsin. It's the place to be.
Absolutely. You got Tyrese Hunter that also went to St. Cat's, legend. Yep. I don't know if you went to any of his basketball games, but he was an absolute beast.
I did not. No, I did not. But Jim McElvain, I went to his basketball games at St. Catherine's. I missed Nick Van Exel. He played at St. Joe's, St. Catherine's rival. But I'm talking about names way back in the past. You guys don't even know who Jim McElvain is, but anyways, a former NBA player, St. Catherine's standout.
He went to Marquette, right?
He did go to Marquette. Yeah, and actually he's the voice, I believe, still of the analyst for Marquette basketball games.
Absolutely. No, Jim's a legend. Okay. I did not know he was from the depths of Racine over there.
Yeah.
But also, you mind touching on, because I was listening to another podcast and I heard how important your dad was to you growing up in your baseball career. Can you touch on the importance that your dad had on kind of where you're at today?
Yeah. I mean, my goodness, my dad was such a great influence on me in many ways. Taught me how to be a man, right? I mean, he did everything that any young boy would want out of a father as they look back and see how he impacted my life. So, the man is my hero. I strive to be like my dad. But what he did on my Can you guys still hear me?
You're back.
Okay. So my father, I was always very passionate about the game of baseball, extremely passionate about the game of baseball. Ever since I can remember, I wanted to play baseball. I would chase the ball around. I would always want to practice. I would always want to take batting practice. And no matter whatever my dad was doing, if he was doing paperwork or bills or whatever, he's a school psychologist by trade. So he would take his work home with him at times to kind of complete some testing that he would do on ground balls or some fly balls, and he would every single time. I cannot ever remember a time when he said he was too busy. So he would drop anything to do that and practice the game with me, and that would go for basketball too. I wasn't a great basketball player, or soccer and soccer as well, but anything that I wanted to kind of practice or spend time with him, he would drop anything and do it. I think that was that was the thing that stuck out very, very much to me about why he was such a positive influence on my life, among other things. A very moral man, devout Catholic man. But the I think I lagged again, guys. I'm done with my answer. Hopefully you got enough.
You're all good. You're all good. No worries. And do you think that that, like, with a lot of those morals and having such a, a great role model growing up, do you think that you kind of attributed, you took some of those attributes with you when you went on to whether it's lacrosse or it's your playing career or even where you're at right now in your day-to-day life?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Look, I'm a flawed human being. I was never perfect, and I never will be perfect as I live my life and as I've lived my life. But it always came back to, in the back of my mind, my dad's example and my mom's. I am lagging. Hopefully it's okay. But yeah, just in the back of my mind, it was always there. What would your dad do, or what would my dad do, and what example did he set for me? 100%. So even if I made mistakes along the way, I would always go back to that for sure.
I wanted to ask too. I know you kind of touched on it, especially with you saying how your dad would help you out whatever sports you're doing. Was there a time, and I know you said you always really liked baseball, but was there a point where you really started to take it serious or felt like, maybe you're good enough to play at kind of the next level, whether it's, obviously high school, then college, and then obviously going to the pros?
I never thought I would be able to play. I was always a good player, but I was always undersized. I didn't develop physically until I was about a junior in high school, actually. So, junior in college, actually. So, yeah. So I never thought I was going to be good enough to play at the next level professionally until that junior year, until I, again, grew physically. I got stronger. I was always a good athlete. I was always kind of a quick twitch guy, at very fast hands in terms of bat quickness and hand speed. But I never, again, I was undersized. So there's always players that were better than me. And again, I kind of thought of myself as a guy that could probably play in college, but, pros was a dream. Playing in professional baseball was an absolute dream that, again, I your limitations. Until I grew, I didn't think I could play at the next level. So once I did, then baseball got kind of easy for me at the college level. I started hitting home runs, 15 home runs my senior year at UW-Lacrosse in 44 games, right? And so we didn't play a ton of games. But at that point, when the game felt like it was easy, I was like, man, I think I'm good enough to move on to the next level and get a chance to play professionally. And so that's kind of at that point, junior year, my senior year for sure, I really wanted that chance.
And with that too, I mean, I tried researching a little bit more, but was it true that you played all 9 positions in a game?
I did, yeah. So my second year playing professionally, so I signed in 2003. I was lucky enough to stick around just 1 year and I ended up playing for the Helena Brewers. I think the Brewers really didn't know what they had in me, so I hit well enough to stick around 1 more year. That offseason, I really kind of revamped my swing, took some of the advice from one of the hitting coaches named Jim Schlehlein, who's still a good friend of this day. And I was in the weight room every day. I got bigger and stronger, and then also really kind of revamped some of the things I needed to work on with my swing and tapped into more power. So I was a guy that really never struck out and had a pretty good eye at the plate, but I didn't hit for any power. I had 1 home run in Helena, went to Beloit that following year. That was the first full season of professional baseball that I played, went to low A, and ended up winning minor league player of the year. By the end of the year, we were out of it. And Don Money was my manager, and he said, "Hey, want to play all 9 positions?" It was the last game of the year, so I ended up. I'm all right. I think I'm all right. I think I led short, second, first, and then moved around the outfield, and then finished the last inning pitching. So that's how that played out. And I played all 9. It was cool.
What was the velo looking like in that 9th inning? Did you feel like Aroldis Chapman coming out, or what was that like?
I always had a good arm, and I just wanted to see what I could hit on the gun, right? So I think I touched 88. So I was like, oh, all right. I'm glad it wasn't like 93 or something. So I knew, like, if I, didn't end up making it as a position player, that I wouldn't be converted to a pitcher. That's kind of how I felt at the time.
Yeah.
Hey, well, these days you never know if you could be a position player or be a pitcher or not. I mean, Rowdy Tellez threw 50 miles an hour, and I mean, he could be the next closer for the Pirates.
That was a great kind of moment for the Brewers last year when Rowdy came in. He was saying he's the greatest reliever ever, right? The greatest left-handed reliever ever because he didn't give up any runs. But yeah, that was cool.
It's interesting that you say that too about maybe not wanting to pitch, because I know we saw that you might have been familiar with Lucas Yersig, who used to be in the Brewer system for a while. I hope I said his last name right, but
Yersig,
I know they converted him to a pitcher. So it's interesting to hear that you were kind of like iffy on not wanting to do that, but obviously with being such a versatile player, I'm sure you enjoy playing the field.
Yeah, that was it. I never wanted to pitch. I wanted to play a position. I wanted to play every day. In fact, I wanted to be a catcher. I converted from I played shortstop in college and wanted to catch. And so I never wanted to be pitchers pitch very sparingly. If you're a starter, it's once every 5 days. And then if you're a reliever, you got to sit down there until they call your name. You give up a home run, and then you sit down there for another 3 days until you get a chance to come back in and lower your ERA. As a position player, you can play. You have the opportunity to play every day. So never thought pitching would have been very fun.
I do want to touch real quick too, because we were talking about it. How was it playing, I guess, in Beloit, especially, two sides of it, being in Wisconsin, and then, I don't think Pullman was necessarily the greatest field and kind of tucked away in the neighborhood. But it might have been, back. I don't know exactly when that field was, but so how was it playing there?
In Beloit, it was pretty much what you would expect it to be if you've ever played at Pullman Field, right? So it was kind of there's a reason why they had to build a new field in order to keep a minor league affiliate there, right? So it was kind of it wasn't the greatest. It wasn't the worst either, right? So they had a pretty good playing surface. You had a decent batter's eye. That's really all players care about, especially a guy like myself who was trying to just scratch and claw and scrape his way to the next level. I thought it was totally fine. I did love the Midwest League. Thought that league was great. That low A league, first full season for most players to play in that Midwest League. Travel was not horrible. You ride on buses, you watch movies, you make good friends with these guys that you're with every single day for 5 months, every single day straight. So, I thought it was fine.
Well, taking it back real quick to your 2002 season at Lacrosse, I mean, Vinny, you batted .410. Okay, you're an All-American. What was it like at the plate, and did it feel like the pitchers were throwing beach balls at you every at bat?
It really did, quite frankly. Most guys were throwing about 80 to 84 miles an hour in that league in the Uecker. Guys are throwing much harder nowadays. I think all over baseball, all over collegiate baseball, and even in the Uecker. It's a great conference for baseball. I preach all the time to find a great fit for yourself at the next level, and UW-Lacrosse was a great fit for me playing in the Uecker. Yes, it felt at that point like it was there was a beach ball coming in. I saw the ball great. I hit a bunch of homers. Like I said, I just felt like the game slowed down. The game got much easier for me, and I wanted that next challenge after college.
No, that's a fair point. And as somebody that went to the Harvard of the Midwest, aka Wisconsin Whitewater, I know about what the WEAC's like a little bit. But on campus, baseball, baseball's popular, but it's not. You're not getting the basketball or the football crowds and all that kind of stuff. But did your life change on campus that season, and did you feel like you got some notoriety picked up in the lacrosse area?
A little bit. I started getting covered in the paper. I would notice, a little bit, kind of more fans would be coming to the game. Not a ton. It wasn't a ton, but I started getting covered in the paper and on the news. So yeah, there was a little bit of that, but not a whole lot.
Okay. Brandon, real quick. And also in 2003, I'm a big fan of Ed Cedar, and I didn't realize that he had been, because I went into a rabbit hole this afternoon, and I was just looking at Helena Brewers for the last X amount of years, and And Eddie was your first coach. And seeing that Brewers fantasy camp, you still have the relationship to him. This is a two-parter, but what was Eddie like then compared to now? And did he have the air horn with him in 2003?
Oh, he did. Yes. One of my first experiences in professional baseball is meeting Eddie Cedar with that air horn. Now, he didn't scare people like he does now with that air horn at Brewers fantasy camp. And by the way, if anyone ever whoever's listening to this and you're 30 years old, that's kind of the threshold. You have to be 30 and over, has a chance to get down to Brewers fantasy camp. Do it. It's just a great week. People talk about how it's like literally the best week of their lives and the most fun week of their lives. But anyway, yes, Eddie Cedar was my first coach, my first manager. So I actually had him in spring training. He was the field coordinator at the time for the minor league side for the Milwaukee Brewers. He was also the Helena manager. So guys would go to spring training. Helena was a short season team. So guys would go to spring training in March. If you didn't make a team, you were going to extended spring training. That's where I had to go. And I then had to wait until the Helena Brewer season started, which is also when the newly drafted guys for that season would go, and they would start out in Helena, Montana. And their first manager was Eddie Cedar. He was a leader among men. He was a leader of men. He still is to this day, but it was such a good experience to have Eddie Cedar as my first manager, because he set the tone as to what professional baseball should be like, how you should play, how you should carry yourself, how you should represent the organization you're playing for, the Milwaukee Brewers. It was just really, I don't know if I would have played Major League Baseball without Eddie Cedar as my first manager. Again, just for all the reasons that I just described. At fantasy camp, and what is Eddie Cedar like now? He is just a special person. He is so funny. His stories are so funny. His voice is absolutely hilarious. You can hear him from a mile away. His energy every single day that he brings to the ballpark. And then the air horn, those air horn gags are just absolutely hilarious, where he startles guys, comes up right behind him and blows the air horn. And then you see him jump. It never gets old. It never gets old. So Eddie Cedar, one of my best friends, in the game. And I was really glad to have crossed paths with Eddie in my life.
And real quick, can you share the quote that Eddie gave you that kind of helped shift your mentality for the game of baseball?
Did I ever say that? I don't remember. Did I say that at some point when you were doing your deep dive? You came across that? Jog my memory.
Yeah. So you had said that that it was about I believe it was being comfortable in the uncomfortable.
Oh yeah. No, that was so. Eddie always talked about that in rookie ball. You know, that you really have to work hard at being comfortable, being uncomfortable, because that's, I mean, when you get to at any stage in baseball. Baseball is a game where you're on a stage, okay? You're in the batter's box, or you're on the pitcher's mound, or you're in the infield and a ground ball is hit to you, or you're in the outfield and a fly ball is hit to you. And so you are on a stage where everyone can see you individually try and perform in that moment. And so that's an uncomfortable feeling. I think I had over 3,000 at bat. How many at bats have I had? Way over 3,000. I don't even know. However many at bats. Still, my last at bat I remember in 2016. I was in AAA for the White Sox playing for the Charlotte Knights, and I still remember the feeling of being anxious, of being nervous in an at bat after all those years, 14 years professional baseball, all those at bats. I still had that adrenaline. So you have to learn. And then that just goes up 1,000-fold once you get to the major leagues. They add the third deck, they add the bright lights, you've got ESPN reporters there, whatever. And so you have to learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. So I'll never forget Eddie saying that. And really that holds true for really anything in life. Anything worthwhile doing, you're probably going to have some level of adrenaline, some level of anxiety going on if you want to do well at it.
Well, touching on that a little bit, since you brought it up, I feel like, not enough guys really talk about, kind of the nerves or the anxiety that comes with it. your first at bat in the majors, I feel like that's something either you obviously really remember clearly or kind of one of those moments where it's like, oh, I kind of blacked out. Like, can you talk about that a little bit and just like really being on that stage for the first time? And then obviously, you know, playing at Miller Park then in your home state for the first time, I guess.
Yeah, grew up as a huge Brewer fan. Obviously still am a huge Brewer fan. Got signed by my hometown team, by my, the team that I grew up watching, Paul Molitor, Robin Yount. And I get to my first game and the Brewers we were still in the playoff race. I just came up from AAA and I may have been the hottest hitter in all of minor league baseball at that point. I mean, I was raking, I was tearing the cover off the ball. And I get up there first day, sellout crowd. There was an article written about me, front page. I was a non-drafted free agent in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Drew Olson, I believe, wrote it. And so I'm sitting there reading the article about me with a big picture of me. So it was, I wouldn't say overwhelming, because like I said, I was confident at that point. I was really swinging the bat well down at AAA. So anyway, game, 9th inning, game on the line, 2 outs. Ned Yost tells me, hey, if JJ gets on, I think it was JJ, then you're going to pinch hit for Brady Clark, actually. So it was a closer in the ball game. It was Joe Borowski was on the mound for the Marlins, and I get an at bat, standing ovation. I'm in the on deck circle. I'm nervous, but I'm okay. And I'm like, I'm going to get this done. Get on base or whatever. So he gets on base, and then they announce my name. Now pinch hitting, Vinny Rottino. The whole crowd, standing ovation. Okay, because again, the article, the hometown kid, the non-drafted free agent, the great feel-good story, and I get a standing ovation my first at bat in the big leagues. Again, the game is also on the line with 2 outs, and I felt like I was going to fall on my face walking to the plate.
I can imagine.
So just the level of adrenaline, the most adrenaline you've ever experienced, multiply that by 100. That was my experience, my first at bat. Now, I still was feeling pretty good. All right, I'm going to stay with the same approach. I ended up swinging at a first pitch slider in the dirt. And then I get to 2 strikes and I read that same slider. And I was like, that's another slider. I saw it, and it was a pitch, and it stayed up. It did not. It was probably supposed to be a chase pitch, and it stayed up just enough where I forget who was catching, but he stuck it. It was outside. It was literally an inch outside or 2 inches outside, and it was called strike 3. And it was a demoralizing feeling, but I'll never forget it. I remember every single last detail. I remember seeing the seams on the baseball. But I just didn't get it done. But yeah, it was, everything for a reason and all that. So, it was quite the memory.
That's an awesome story. I'm glad you shared. And, I could imagine, I can't imagine because I haven't been there, but just, what you saying, walking up there feeling like you're, going to fall on your face and just with everybody looking. And that's a tough situation for anybody to be in, let alone your first ever at bat. In the
hometown.
Yeah. So that's crazy, but it's really cool that you remember, the pitcher and picking up the pitches. Is that something obviously as you grow as a baseball player, and you're good enough, you're just going to be better at that. But how did, you say you read the slider, is that just something that the second you kind of see it come out of his hand, you just that's the same motion? Or, I mean, obviously that's impressive to pick it up, but I know that's the difference between playing in the big leagues and not.
Yeah. So, I had a pretty good eye at the plate, so I didn't chase a lot of pitches. So I really, I think knowing some of the stuff that hitters do now to tap into some more power, we didn't know any of that stuff back then. But I was a player, especially against right-hand pitching, that I would allow the ball to kind of travel a little bit deeper, especially with 2 strikes. I refused to strike out. My coach, Jack Sheastel, growing up playing for Racine Kiwanis, he taught me the game as well as my dad. But he was one of the guys that taught me the game. He always preached, don't strike out. And so I kind of took that to heart and used that all the way through into professional baseball as well. So I especially 2 strikes, I shortened up. I allowed the ball, to get deep on me. So with 2 strikes, I was able to pick up the slider a little bit better. When I was in situations where I was less than 2 strikes, I would, especially in situations where the guy was throwing a little bit harder, I would try and get the bat head out a little bit. But with 2 strikes, saw it deeper, and then that's when I was able to pick up some of the off-speed pitches pitchers would throw. But that was kind of an approach thing. But I always had a pretty good eye. I could always discern ball from strike, and I could always kind of see the pitches coming in. I always had a pretty good eye.
Mm-hmm. Well, when it comes to pinch hitting, I can only imagine that, it's hard to stay in a rhythm, like before you come in, because you might not, like, you might get a tip like, hey, Vinny, like Ned said, you might be going in, but you also might not be going in, so what's it like to stay into a rhythm with that? And, when you're not playing every single day and you get that at bat, like I'm thinking specifically like with the Mets, like when it was you and Ike Davis for that period of time. I guess, can you just take us through what that was like?
Hard. I gotta imagine it's maybe with the exception of being like a cornerback in the NFL, being a pinch hitter and being successful at it has got to be the hardest thing in all of sports. Because here's why: you go from playing every single day in the minor leagues, even if you're talented enough to make it to the big leagues. You're probably a lot of guys will make it to the big leagues, but be not talented enough to play every day in the big leagues. If that makes sense. So you're talented enough to play every day in AAA, and then you're facing not as good a pitching, quite frankly. I mean, you're just not in AAA. It's good pitching, but just not as good as when you get to the major leagues. It's every single reliever is throwing 95 plus. Every single reliever has got a nasty slider. Every single starter has great stuff, and if they don't have great stuff, they have pinpoint command. In AAA, you are facing arms that are, they scatter balls, or their stuff just is not quite as good. So you're facing guys and playing every single day, so you're getting in that rhythm against some of that subpar pitching, and then you go to the major leagues and you're pinch hitting, so you're not in that good rhythm. You don't have that timing, that rhythm down. And then these guys are coming in and throwing just absolute fuel with disgusting off-speed secondary stuff. So it's extremely difficult. The guys that are successful at it probably were everyday position players, or probably everyday players at one point in their career at the major league level. And then maybe they're a little bit older. And so that's when you do see, more guys, like that have more success pinch hitting. But it's definitely tough. And then you add in the fact that you're not a guy like me who's trying to establish himself as a major leaguer. So there's that extra layer of, I gotta get a hit, so anytime you say I gotta in baseball, it's probably not going to happen.
No, it's completely fair. And, I guess to cap it off with the Brewers, being in that clubhouse, I can imagine, for every game that you play with the Brewers, your family, like, was your family out there every single time you were there?
At Miller Park, when it was called Miller Park at the time, my family did go to every single game that I was playing. I think every game in 2006. But after that, I didn't play. I got one at bat in 2008, and I was up for the entire month of September. But that was just absolutely awesome to be part of that 2008 run with CC Sabathia, kind of carrying the team on his back. But yeah, I always probably had a family member or friend in the stands during my tenure in the big leagues with the Brewers.
This is just kind of a random question that came to my head. But when you get called up, like I know like Racine isn't as close to Miller Park as one might like. But did you ever stay at home and like sleep at home before one of the games, or were you always just like posted up in the hotel?
No, I always, the team put us the September call ups. I was called up in September each of my 3 call ups with the Brewers. they would put us up at a hotel. And so I stayed there. I wasn't going to live at home while I was in the big leagues.
I didn't know if it was like a Tommy DeVito type situation or not.
No, it wasn't. But that's a great story too.
I also want to ask too about 2008. We did get CC. As a Brewers fan, I still have his youth medium jersey somewhere at my house. It was an absolutely electric time. What was it like for you being in that dugout? And Brandon and I are both lifelong Brewers fans. We're diehards. We're at spring training all the time. What was it like for you as a fan growing up, playing and seeing the Brewers actually have a chance at something great?
No, like I said, I mean, dream come true. Never forget it. Yes, the Brewers piece of that and that whole narrative around the Brewers not making the playoffs or making the playoffs for the first time since 1982. That was such a cool moment to be a part of. But to watch CC Sabathia do what he did, and then like I take pride in the fact that I would catch every single one of his bullpens whenever he had a side session when he was when I was up there with him. So that was a cool memory, and yeah, just that was like a Michael Jordan type moment, right? Whatever, every time CC would take the mound and kind of put the team on his back and pretty much willed the Brewers into the playoffs all by himself.
Wow. When CC came back, I believe he was back this past year, right?
Yeah. Yep. I missed him. I was not at the ballpark. I wasn't working that day. Yep.
Man. Okay. I was hoping you had interaction with him.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I missed him. I was being dad of the year. So yeah.
Hey, somebody's got to do it. It might as well be you.
Yep.
All right, Brandon.
Yeah. Well, I guess kind of switching over to, from the Brewers career. And then as we're talking now with broadcasting, how was kind of that switch and what was the learning curve like? And when did you kind of gain interest in that? Obviously you're a great baseball mind.
Oh, I appreciate that, guys. Yeah. Brandon, that's kind of you to say. Well, I was after I got done playing, I was like, I got to stay in the game. Like that was just the natural thing for me to do, is to think like, what's my next job in the game? In fact, I knew it was my last year playing in 2016. I said that I played in AAA for the Chicago White Sox. I was in Charlotte. I, again, knew it was going to be my last year. My body just wasn't recovering like it used to. I was 36 years old. Started off hot, then really just hit a skid. I'm like, all right, I'm done after this year. I was just kind of tired and wanted to be done. My wife and I were having a baby, and I didn't want to continue to play while, we would have a newborn and stuff like that. So I was sending out my resume to all the teams and emails to all the scouting director. I wanted to be a scout. I always was fascinated about scouting. So I ended up getting a job with the Texas Rangers as a pro scout. So I was involved in, what a pro scout, there's three types of scouts in baseball. There's an amateur scout, and that's kind of what you think of scouts going to high school games, college games, and then they're involved in the draft. I wasn't that. There's international scouts, guys that go down to the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico, and they scout international players. I wasn't that. I was a pro scout. So guys that are involved in trades, player to be named later, they would talk to guys like us. We would have our pref list with all the different organizations. And then that's what I did for 4 years. I loved it. I couldn't keep doing it because I had 3 little girls at home and it was too much travel. So I ended up leaving the Texas Rangers, ended up getting a regular sales job. And I did that for 2 years. In the interim, Mike Anderson I got to be really good friends with Mike Anderson. He was a pro scout also for the Texas Rangers. His brother is Brian Anderson, the voice of the Milwaukee Brewers, the legendary Brian Anderson. So that's his brother. Mike told me, he's like, hey, look, Brian thinks you'd be good at broadcasting. I'm like, no, I would. No, I thought that was like not in the cards for me. I didn't think it really was. So anyway, I pursued it. With Brian's hand holding every step of the way. He's still holding my hand every step of the way, but I tried it out in 2022 was my first year. No, I'm sorry. 2021 was my first year Doing it, I got about 20 games doing the pre and post game show. Then the following year, I got about 50 games and 10 games in the booth. And last year, I did like 70 games pre post and almost 40 games in the booth. And so I have loved every single minute of it. I was terrible at it at first. I've learned, again, through the tutelage of Brian Anderson, through the tutelage of Bill Schroeder, Rock, total legend, that, you just, the more reps you do, the more podcasts you do, the more radio shows you go on, the more you study the game. It's just like being a scout, quite frankly. But the more you just get lost in it and lost in the game, you start to realize, okay, pretty good at this and want to keep doing it. I actually like broadcasting more than I liked playing. As much as I loved playing, I absolutely love broadcasting. I love giving my insights on things. I've been having a blast with it.
Well, I think it's interesting too, as somebody that, you have a scouting background. So I would think that your opinion is like a little more valid on TV, like compared to others, just because you've seen the playing, the scouting, and now the broadcasting side. And I think we're also really lucky too from Milwaukee. I mean, Rock, BA, and obviously Mr. Belvedere, Bob Uecker, the legend. Have you had any interaction with Bob? And I love Bob. I've met Bob multiple times. He always says, "Don't call me Mr. Uecker, it's Bob," which I find very funny at a young 89 years old.
He's 90. He's 90.
90 now.
Yep.
Good catch. But what was it like when you first time, I guess, you met Bob, and what's it like to kind of be around him? Not necessarily working with him, but still.
Yeah. The first time I met him was in spring training, and he was as a player, and he would always come around the clubhouse, and he would interact with the guys, and he would, say, "Hey, what's up, Vinny?" Like in his Bob Uecker voice. And it was like, whoa, that's Bob Uecker. And, you grow up listening to the guy on the radio, an absolute legend. The stardom, you're just kind of starstruck at first, but then you realize he is a normal dude. And he is a dude. He's a guy's guy, right? So just interacting with him, hearing his jokes, awesome. And then, I do see him around the broadcast booth from time to time. He's the same guy at 90 years old. He is an absolute legend, one of the greatest of all time in the broadcast booth. He loves the game. You can tell that. He loves the Brewers, which is so cool that we get Bob Uecker, right? So we're just really lucky.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you think about too with Bob back in the day, I mean, one of my favorite photos of Bob ever taken, you've probably seen it too, is of him with the tuba in the outfield for the Cardinals. That's one of the most electric things. Yeah.
I don't know if I see it. I'm going to Google it right now.
Oh, yeah. Look up Bob Uecker Cardinals tuba, and you'll see him with it in the outfield.
All right. Let's see this.
I'd like.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. It's on his baseball card when he was with the Cardinals. It looks like. That's hilarious. That's him in a nutshell, though. That's him in a nutshell. He's going to do anything, not anything for a laugh, but anything that is funny. You're going to find Bob Uecker kind of being at the forefront of that. He is an absolute legend.
Absolutely. And would you mind, I know you had mentioned Brian Anderson, and Brian Anderson is an idol of mine. He's a legend. I don't get starstruck very often, like beating people, but I was starstruck when I met him back at Brewers on Deck, and I think call it 2019 or something. But you said that you used to not be a good broadcaster. You said you lean on Brian all the time. What are some things that he's taught you, and what are some things that you look back and maybe you watch your own film? What are some things you look back on that you're like, "Hey, Vinny, come on, what are we doing?"
Pretty much the entire first year, I'm like, "Hey, what are we doing?" So it's almost cringe. I can't really watch it. I do have my first show, and it's cringe worthy. It really is. But BA, yes, an absolute legend. BA he came over one day and made what you're seeing here. I know that you're not supposed to see this utility sink here, but it's the platform we're using is a little bit wider shot. But he came over one day, him and Dom Catronio came over, and they made this studio for me, and they spent about 8 hours over here making this studio for me because I needed to get more reps, and I actually took over for the Lockdown Brewers podcast for about a half a season. And so this is what he made for me, and it's awesome. And that's the kind of guy Brian Anderson is. If you need help, he will help you. He will give you the shirt off of his back. He is a down-to-earth guy. He's just a tremendous human being. I still think about some of the stuff that Brian Anderson taught me that first year because I still fall into the same mistakes from time to time, not as often. But basically, the best advice he gave me was you have to stay present in the moment. If you make a mistake, you just keep going. So it's a moment. You make a mistake. You don't look back at the moment. That's when people get tripped up on camera. You just keep going. And the other thing was you're going to be thinking about for a while, and I was probably until recently, maybe the middle of my second year, you're going to be thinking about what people are thinking of you. It's more like from the outside in. Mm-hmm. Eventually, you're going to start thinking about from the inside out. So what do you have to say, and just basically say it. So those are the two things that have stuck with me a ton. Because again, I still, and I probably will until I get my feet underneath me to start this next season, just because you do get rusty at times, right? The way that your mind works and the way that your mind needs to work in order to be good on camera. You have to stay present. And so just stay present, know what you have to say, and just say it.
I think that's really great advice, and obviously it's coming from, like we said, an absolute legend in Brian Anderson. But there's also another broadcasting legend that we haven't touched on, and I believe you know this guy pretty well. I think he was your 2003 Helena Brewers teammate, maybe, Mr. Tim Dillard.
That's right.
Have you learned anything from that media mogul, and what's it like to work together on air?
He is talk about a funny guy. I mean, he's a very talented individual as well. How quick he is, how funny he is, his social media stuff. I watch it all the time and just laugh. His voiceover stuff, hilarious. Yeah, I mean, you can learn something from anybody. In fact, we were teammates in 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, and I think 2007. Dillard and I were teammates, I think, for 5 straight seasons. In fact, we were roommates in 2004 in Beloit. We piled about 9 guys into a 2-bedroom apartment. Dillard was one of them.
Wow. So awesome.
But just a funny guy, creative as can be. Yeah, I learn from Dillard all the time. I watch the pre and post game show when he's on. I listen to his color commentary when he's on, and you pick up little stuff from everybody. So I definitely do from Dillard.
And Brandon, I'll let you go in a second, but you said you lived with him in Beloit with some other guys. Is there a story that comes, like when you think of Tim Dillard, is there like a pinnacle story that comes to mind that you wouldn't mind sharing with us? You guys together?
You know what? Dillard didn't become like the social media. I mean, there wasn't social media back then anyway, but
right.
He wasn't the goofy guy as he is now back then. I mean, Dillard was 94 with a bowling ball sinker from a low 3/4 slot and a gross slider. Like, I thought Dillard was going to be like a staple in the rotation arm for the Brewers. In fact, in 2005, he was the Brewers minor league pitcher of the year. So he didn't become this other ego of him until I think later on in his career when he was kind of a journeyman and not. Well, I take that back, actually, because when he was in the big leagues, there's videos of him impersonating Tim Kirkchin, right? So I was gone from those teams. I was gone already when he was doing that stuff. So I was already, kind of bouncing around from org to org. But I think that is probably my most memorable memory of Dillard because he could do great impersonations.
Well, I wanted to this is a little bit off base with the Brewers, but I want to ask about this before we kind of ask some of the wrap-up questions. Your time in Japan, what was that like? And with that question, did your family ever come to watch you or, friends flying out? I'm sure maybe there's at least a time, but what was that experience? Because obviously that's a different realm. Obviously basketball kind of has the EuroLeague and stuff like that, but baseball, I feel like it's not as common. Or maybe it is more common than I know. But what was that like? Baseball is
life for people in Japan. Actually, like that is the sport to watch in Japan as well as Korea. I played in the NPB, which is the Japanese, major leagues in 2013, and then in 2014 I played in Korea's highest league. So South Korea's highest league, the KBO, so the Korean Baseball Organization. Both extremely valuable experiences, both awesome experiences. Yeah. In fact, like I said, baseball is life for people over there. So, I mean, sold out crowds, packed, on their feet the entire time, blowing horns, screaming in between pitches, 30,000 fans. 30,000 fans in Japan and Korea is, like 60,000 here, screaming, yelling during a World Series game. And that's just like a middle of the week game. So that was an awesome experience. I got to play 2 years over in Asia. It was awesome.
Did you have any kind of, moment, a specific moment, or maybe when you got there, like, I don't want to necessarily say a culture shock, but obviously from going from the U.S. and playing, baseball here your whole life to now going there, I'm sure is obviously a tough transition.
It was
something along those lines.
Yeah, it was. But a guy like me that was up and down from the big leagues pretty much for 10 years, that's your goal, is actually to get over to Asia, because the salaries are going to be better than in AAA and they're guaranteed, right? So, so that was my goal, and I ended up achieving that goal. So any kind of culture shock. I mean, I played in Venezuela in the Winter League, which that was it was a culture shock, just because I played on the same team as Wilson Ramos when he was kidnapped, actually. So I don't know if people don't really know that story. Wilson,
no,
I mean, it's in the public, so you can Google it. Wilson Ramos was kidnapped. He was kidnapped. I played with him. He was on our team one day, and then he was kidnapped the next day. And he was gone for about 6 weeks, a month, whatever. And it was just insane, right? So insane stuff. So that was more of a culture shock. Didn't feel quite safe over there.
Yeah.
But, I don't know if it's different now, if it's safer or whatever. It's kind of scary stuff. So any kind of culture shock or whatever in Asia, I didn't really. I mean, I was there to play baseball. I actually loved the culture over there in both countries. It was a really cool experience.
So I'll look up the story after the fact. But I've never heard of a player being kidnapped, I guess, mid-season before a game.
It was in the Winter League. Yeah, I don't really know the whole story, but there's stories of players, Venezuelan-born players, who have had like family members kidnapped, and then for ransom. And so, like, guys that have made a lot of money. It's kind of sad and scary and stuff like that. But yeah, you can read all about it. Just Venezuelan kidnapping. It's more so with, like I said, it was more kind of, it wasn't ever common, I don't think. I hope not. But it happened in the past with family members of players who have made millions of dollars. This was the first time I had ever heard, and I think it's clearly it's never happened again, where an actual player got kidnapped. So I don't know the whole story, the ins and outs of why it happened, but I was on that team.
Wow. Well, Vinny, I can assure you I'm going to go into that rabbit hole after this.
I trust that you will.
Yeah, it's 100%. Go ahead. I was going to say it's 100% guaranteed. But also, speaking on that, on playing ball other places, you played in the DR for about 50 games, right, over the winter. I've seen a lot of videos on the DR stadium and like the different like little stadiums there, and I know that there can be like really big rivalries, that you might not expect in the States. Can you talk about the atmosphere playing there, and then was there ever anything like crazy or out of the ordinary that happened during a game / even anything off the field that you'd feel comfortable sharing?
So playing Winter League baseball, if any player has an opportunity to play Winter League baseball, you got to take it because you can get better, and you play in front of 10, 15,000 fans who talk about being wild in the stands. I mean, that is absolutely nuts, playing in both Venezuela and the Dominican in front of those fans, and how loud they are, hanging on every single pitch, cheering, loud, boisterous. probably overserved, right? There's no seventh inning cutoffs or whatever there with the beverages, I don't think. But some of the crazier stuff that happened over there during games is like the lights would just shut off. Like it would just be completely dark in the stadium for maybe 10 minutes at a time. So, and that happened, just because of their power grid wasn't as sophisticated as our power grid over here in the States. You'd be in the middle of an inning and the whole place would go dark. And so you would sit there, you go back in the dugout for 10 minutes, and then the lights would go back on and you resume play. So that happened all the time, actually. So that was probably the craziest stuff and things that would happen over there. So, yeah, we stayed at a resort, Casa de Campo, a great resort in the Dominican Republic. That's where they put the American guys up at. So there wasn't really anything too crazy that would happen off the field. Okay.
Wow, that's crazy that lights turn off during a game like that. I know. Yeah. I know at good old Pullman Field, those lights stay on well past the game end. So I love that. Do you remember any notable players that you played with over there, and other than Wilson Ramos and DR in Venezuela?
Let me try and rack my brain here real quick. I played with an American teammate. I played with Billy Butler the first year. So Billy Butler was he is actually an American guy, right? Obviously,
legend.
Yep. So Billy Butler was on our team that first season in the Dominican. But if you were playing winter ball, you typically weren't a top prospect, so you were kind of a journeyman. I mean, the native guys, right? The guys from the DR or Venezuela, obviously those guys play. But there wasn't any stars on my team for La Romana. I played for La Romana, and I played for Los Tigres in Venezuela. And then Wilson Ramos was the biggest name that I played with.
Did you get to keep any of those jerseys?
Yeah, I have those somewhere. They're not behind me, but I have those.
That's so awesome. And I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about you playing for 2009 Team Italy, right? World Baseball Classic. As somebody that's Italian, I find that awesome, and I actually have some really cool South Italy stuff, but that's beside the point. But what was it like for you to play for your national team?
That was one of the cooler experiences that I had playing professional baseball, because half the team was American-born players who had some ancestry tied to the old country, tied to Italy, and then half of the players were from Italy. They played in a professional league over there. There's still a professional league over there. Mm-hmm. They took the best players from that league and paired them with some of the Italian players, players with Italian ancestry in the United States. And what was so cool about that is we were underdogs, right? So we were playing in the same pool as the Canadian team with players like Justin Morneau and Joey Votto and Russell Martin, stars in the major leagues, and then also playing against the Venezuela national team in that pool. And so we ended up beating Team Canada game one, and sort of like, and the energy around the club for after beating Team Canada is like, we can win. This is awesome. Mike Piazza was one of our coaches. Tom Trebelhorn, I don't know how he had ancestry to Italy, but Tom Trebelhorn was a former Brewers manager, so I had him as a coach. Awesome. Grew up watching those Brewers teams when he was managing. So it was just a really cool experience from the fact also that those players from Italy, like, they took so much pride in winning and in playing the game and representing their home country, that we just all got sucked up by that energy. And it was just so cool because of that. And then we thought we were going to come out of that pool and win that pool. We ended up losing to Team Venezuela. I think we had to play them twice. But that was one of the cooler moments I had in professional baseball.
That's so awesome. And is it kind of a full circle moment for you too, to see Sal Frelick play for Team Italy and have the success that he had? Have you talked to Sal about that at all? Have you guys exchanged some stories?
Haven't talked to him about that yet, but I'm definitely going to do that when I see him in spring training here. I didn't really want to. I just kind of wanted to, stay away and let him do his thing during his first time in the major leagues this year.
Sure.
But yeah, that's something I'm definitely gonna rap with him about.
Wow, that's awesome. In the booth as well, we just got a couple more, but in the booth as well, have you had like a favorite memory so far being in there?
Well, yes. This last season, I was in the booth with BA and the Yankees. We were at Yankee Stadium. Brewers were playing the Yankees. Garrett Cole Corbin Burns was pitching a no-hitter. It was that game into the 11th inning or into the 8th. He took his no-hitter into the 8th, and then the Brewers ended up having a no-hitter, continuing no-hitter into the 11th, and it was a tie game. I think, was it 0-0? Couldn't take the lead. And so it was that entire game, but it was also the catch that Frelick made up against the wall. Joey Weimer's in center, Frelick was in right, and Frelick saved the no-hitter. But again, they ended up giving up the no-hitter. But I think it was in the 9th or the 10th. Or was it I don't remember the exact situation, but that catch that he made, that was probably the coolest moment in the broadcast world while I was in the booth that happened. But that whole series being at Yankee Stadium with the monuments and being able to broadcast those games, that was definitely has been the highlight so far for me.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome.
That is an awesome moment. It was cool to see Sal obviously get off to a really hot start this year. We did have the chance to kind of talk to him last year at spring training. And a really good, I don't want to call him kid, but obviously he's young, but really good guy. So I'm excited to have him on the team. But yeah, there were a lot of great Brewer moments, and I'm sure it's, different when especially if you're on the road, watching stuff like that happen and cheering on, kind of cheering on the team too, obviously. So.
Yeah, definitely.
Right now, I guess, can we talk a little bit about Brewers baseball? We have a couple quick hitters. So we just got Rhys Hoskins. I think that we're going to win the division, but can you just touch on a little bit what you think we're going to do this year?
Yeah, so I agree with you both. Well, I don't know. Does Brandon have that same sentiment as you, Chris?
Yeah,
I agree with you, Chris. Okay, Brandon's on board with that too, only because of the fact that, look, it's a pretty similar roster from last year, and now you add a Rhys Hoskins, especially the starting pitching staff. Remember, the Brewers did not have Brandon Woodruff pretty much for the entirety of the 2023 season, and yet they won 92 games and have one of the best starting staffs in all of baseball last year. So now all of a sudden you're adding back Wade Miley. So hopefully he can stay healthy most of the year. If you can get 20 starts out of him, that would be tremendous. But you still have Corbin Burns and Freddie Peralta, who are two of the best pitchers in all of baseball last year. And I think Freddie Peralta is going to continue to take steps forward into maintaining and establishing himself as one of the best starters in all of baseball. And Colin Ray did a tremendous job. He was third on the team in innings last year. So that's extremely valuable. Let's see what you can get out of Joe Ross. He's nasty when healthy. He just has not been healthy in his career. And then what does Robert Gasser give you? So PCL Pitcher of the Year, Robert Gasser. So probably the headliner, I think, in the Josh Hader deal, right? So let's see what the Brewers can get out of their starting rotation, which looks almost the same as last year. And then their bullpen is going to be the same, pretty much. Uribe is going to take a step forward. 100-mile-an-hour bowling balls with a nasty slider. So yeah, I can see him stepping into that 8th inning role and taking over at some point down the road, maybe next year or the year after, for the closer role, whenever Devin Williams leaves town. And so, yeah, and then their offense. You add a Rhys Hoskins. He's a right-handed bat. I don't think they're going to have any trouble against left-handed pitching going forward with Rhys Hoskins, and then William Contreras as well, one of the best hitters against left-handed pitching in all of baseball. So both those guys are really going to do a great job solidifying their lineup against Southpaws. I think William Contreras is just going to have a monster season in general. So second full season behind the plate, basically. He caught the most games he ever did last year, and he's just going to continue to get better behind the plate. And then I think he's going to continue to get better offensively. This guy's a force, a strong human being that can hit. He's got that hitting gene for sure. What does Christian Yelich do, right? So Christian Yelich, his July and August were reminiscent of 2018 Christian Yelich. So let's see if he can regain that form for the entire season. And then all the young kids. I love this team. I absolutely love this team. I think they're certainly capable of 90 wins again. Let's see how many they can get.
Yeah, they have a great mix of, veteran guys that, have been around the clubhouse with a great mix of young guys who are just gaining experience, obviously can learn from these guys. And obviously, I think one thing the Brewers kind of pride themselves on is having some, homegrown talent, in the minor league system. So it's cool to see those guys continue to come up. Still a lot of guys, that hopefully we'll see this year. Gasser, like you mentioned, Mizorowski, if you're familiar, might still be, maybe a year away, but he's a guy that Chris and I are big fans of. So it'll be fun to see some of those guys continue to make it to the big leagues.
Yeah, I mean, you hit a really good point there, Brandon. I mean, they're young players in the minor leagues that are top prospects in all of baseball. Mizorowski was probably the star of the future game last year, throwing 100 miles an hour with absolutely filthy breaking ball. So he's on the come, and so is some of the other guys like Jefferson Caro, Tyler Black. Let's see what he can give you at third base. So really exciting group of young, talented players. The future is bright for the Brewers, and so is the present.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you touched on Joe Ross. He's had Tommy John surgery a couple times, and I really hope he gets a shot here. We have a couple quick hitters. You can just give a couple word answers, and then we'll get you on your way.
Sounds good, guys.
So, world traveled. What's your favorite stadium that you've played in, whether it's in the U.S., MLB, minors, or throughout the world?
My favorite stadium to have played in, and people are gonna hate me for this, but honestly, the playing at Wrigley in 2006 was just really cool. Just the history of that stadium. I played at the new Yankee Stadium in 2000. That was 2012 with the Mets, but that was the new stadium. I didn't get a chance to play in the old one. So just the history around and how long Wrigley has been around, that was the coolest stadium to play in.
Wow. And what is the best game that you've witnessed? Doesn't have to be like the craziest game or anything like that, but just in your eyes, like what do you feel like is the best game you watched?
The best game I ever saw was CC, that last game that he pitched to close it out in 2008 and to get that win. That was the best game I ever saw.
And if you could only listen to one artist for the rest of your life, who would it be?
U2. I'm a big U2 fan. I'm a huge U2 fan. And you guys probably have never heard of the band U2, but I'm a huge U2 fan. You guys are too young.
You got to go see him at the Sphere.
I know. I definitely have to do that.
And now this is the second last thing. We'd like to open the floor to you. Do you want to plug anything you're working with? Maybe Maggie Rottino Real Estate, possibly, or anything else that you got going on?
Yeah, no, that's a great call. So if you are in the market to buy or sell, definitely go with my wife, Maggie Rottino. She's the best in southeastern Wisconsin. People that have worked with her just are tremendously happy that they chose her to work with, to buy or sell their home. And then also, prep baseball. So if you are a player who wants to play at that next level, you got to get to a prep baseball showcase. And we start those up starting Saturday in Kenosha. But go to our website, www.prepbaseball.com, and you will see kind of the schedule of our showcases coming up.
Awesome. And last thing. So now having been on the podcast with us and jumping on, who's somebody that you would like to see on our podcast? And before you answer, whoever you name, it'd be awesome if you could help get them on the show.
Well, Dillard, of course. You got to get Dilly on. I'll get them on there. I'll get them on there for you.
I appreciate that. Would be awesome.
Yeah.
Vinny, electric stuff. Thank you so much for taking the time with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, guys. It was a blast. Keep doing what you guys are doing. You guys run a great show.
Thank you. Thank you for the great stories. It was really good insight too. So, and it's got me even more juice for Brewer season. We're kind of at that point where it's picking up a little steam. So I'm glad we got the chat Brewer. So thank you again.
You're welcome, guys. It's time. Go Brewers. World Series this year. Let's do it, guys.
Yes.
Yes, sir.